Well, good afternoon, councillors. It's not quite 4 o'clock, but we've got everybody attending, so I think we might make a start. So welcome along, and I'll declare that the August 2020 council meeting will be in session, and ask for any apologies, but there are none. So we'll move on then to declaration of council conflict of interest. If there's any interest here that you'd like to register at this point in time. If not, thank you. Right, move on then to the confirmation of the minutes and the reports from previous meetings. First one is confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary meeting of council held Tuesday, 14 July 2020. Would somebody like to move that be seen as a true and correct record? Councillor Grant, Senior, thank you, and Councillor Reid. Is there any alteration required to that record? Councillor Highstead.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just item 9, Gore Health building consent fee waiver. I just made the point of the hospital being a charity and non-profit making organisation. The minutes haven't captured that, and I think that's a key difference that probably the minutes should capture.
So it's important that we do recognise that. So that'll be recognised in the text of the conversation at the time. There's nothing further. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So we'll move on then to confirmation of the report of the strategy committee held on Wednesday, 5 August. So firstly, if we can move it as true and correct. Somebody like to move that be seen as a true and correct record of the meeting? Councillor McPhail, thank you. Do I have a seconder of that one? Councillor Grant, thank you. Is there any alteration required to that report?
Yes, Your Worship.
Phillips.
The recommendation that said that the council note that the confirmed funding of 4 million, a rough order of cost of 5.5 million for the project. All through the meeting, I was adamant that we were to remove that 5.5 million from the project. Somehow it's got back in the recommendation, and I'm not sure whether I was possibly asleep at the time, but I think there's other councillors here in this room probably back me that I did say that was part of the motion, recommendation that we remove that 5.5 million. That's because that we can't confirm the rough number of costs until such time as we have due engagement with the community.
So you're correct in that there was a lot of discussion around that. I'm just trying to find the item at the moment. Councillor McDonnell, you want to say something?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Phillips that we were discussing the $4 million budget for that project. That's what we were trying to say in the meeting. And 5.5 was just a figure pulled out of the air based on square meterage, but we were looking for plans from architects that were based around a budget of $4 million for the project.
I think from my memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, that particular part of the recommendation was altered to reflect council note the confirmed funding be of $4 million, and the rest of it was deleted. Is that correct? Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. 5.5 wasn't there.
Okay. So does that suffice, Councillor Phillips?
Yes, Your Worship. It's just we need to remove that reference of that 5.5 million at the moment.
So we'll make that alteration. Are there any other alterations required?
Can we comment, or is it just alterations?
It's just an alteration at this point in time.
So do we get the opportunity to comment?
Yeah, when we discuss the items or the recommendations.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, the motion is carried. That it be seen as a true and correct record with that one alteration. Okay, so the recommendations contained in the report, somebody like to move that they be seen, they be adopted. Councillor Dixon, Councillor Davis, thank you. That is open for any alteration that might be required or any discussion required.
Just wondered, the council endorsed engagement of the design team utilised for the civic administration building upgrade for this project and the engagement of civil management project managers and recommendations. Things have changed since COVID's come in and what an accomplishment in that area with the lack of projects, but I'm not sure whether business would tend to that sort of part of the project.
I think time is probably going to count against a number of changes. Do you want to comment on that one?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think with project management, we have adopted a very much a horses for courses approach. No different to what if you were selecting someone to perhaps a legal firm to represent your interests. Signal management have been, from my memory, selected without a competitive process, but based on past performance. For the past probably 20 years, spanning projects as diverse as the multi-sports complex, the art gallery, the John Munningham extension, the Matara Community Centre, the MVM Industrial Hub, which is a complex project, all of which have been delivered to council satisfaction and gives you a high degree of confidence. On that basis, that was why the invitation was made to you to select this group. And Owen designed that can literally transplant themselves from next door and put themselves into this particular facility with well-established relationships, and any lessons learned from next door can be imported into this project. That's the rationale behind it.
Thank you. So I think I understand what you're saying, Councillor Gardine.
Just so I can see, there's probably a lot of those companies have probably been quite competitive at the moment for that sort of work. Yeah, I just wondered if it was commented on at the meeting or whether it was just passed over it.
Councillor, I can't recall it being discussed, Councillor.
He's not being there. I think I agree with John, and I take the point that Steve's making, but I guess it's quite a significant spend in the budget line that doesn't get competitively checked. So is there an alternative way of actually just checking that we're getting value for money, and how do you value and measure that, of course? But I think it is, if you look at the project next door, the amount we pay to Signal is far greater than we pay a lawyer or an accountant. There's a specialised area. So just to check that we're...
So just in terms of the timing constraints that, providing everything goes well with consultation and we go ahead with the project, how soon could we go through that process and get people up to speed and on board? I guess that's the worry that I would have. Given that there is quite a tight time frame.
Just whether there's some ability to measure that against what happens in other projects, how competitive our lot are. That's what I'm just trying to break out here.
Okay.
I'm same view, but they just charge a standard fee. If I was sitting in Steve's shoes there, I'd be telling Signal Consulting they get a lot of work from us. The standard fee is X%. I want it to drop by 25% because you're getting standard work here. That's what it is. And I had to sit there and look them straight in the eye. If they said no, I'd say, there's the door. I'm getting someone else. That's the way I do business.
We've got a particular view on life, Councillor, and I respect that. Please, John, the Chief Executive.
I was more looking just to see if we're in the range.
Yeah.
So look at some other projects and say, from another council and say, what sort of money are they paying for a similar size project?
So just taking on board the comments that we've made, Steve, do you think you can quantify the value for money that we are getting reasonably quickly from Signal?
I'll endeavour to, Your Worship. I think the flip side is when projects don't go well, and it grabs, and these things grab headlines. when they don't go well and you said, well, look, I took a cheaper competitive option, we decided we could run it ourselves, those type of sentiments would, I think, just be drowned out by the cacophony of public concern about cost overruns. And so Signal has given me personally, as a chief executive, a lot of comfort over the years that they've got our backs and that they cover the risks, they work for us, and generally speaking, they deliver projects on time and without financial surprise. That's a rare commodity in today's world.
Councillor Baldwin?
I think it's a good question to ask. Are we getting value for money from Signal? But the response is, you know, we've got a strong history with them and they have performed every time and every single time. The only other way to double check that if you wanted to go down that track was to get some of their work peer reviewed. That itself takes up a cost, and I would say that will go up your 25% cut that you were wanting. So I think you've got to be careful. You don't hold the gun to somebody who's performing well on assume that they can perform better. Go over the figures as much as you can. That's your job as the chief executive, and you've got the district engineer beside you. But I think you need to be careful and mindful of the good work that these people have already done. It's a good question. It's a fair question. Let's not assume that we're getting. Let's be satisfied with the work they have done for us today and played with good quality on time and so.
Okay, so rather than labour this point, is there an alteration to the recommendation required there? It's not, we'll move on then. Is there anything else in that report that needs to be discussed?
I think this project, through the Mayor, is a very sensitive project, and I've had a lot of people stop me on the street recently, and I'm not a well-known councillor in town, and ask me questions and show great concern about this project. So I think rather than have the project at the community strategy meeting, I think anything on this project should be decided by full council.
So that's what we're discussing now. Absolutely.
Works as chairman of the community strategy, I think that's the recommendation we put forward is that actually comes back to council for final decision. I think some of the commentaries around putting the cart before the horse here, so I think that the motion states that.
Councillor Hosty?
Yeah, look, I do agree with Councillor McNeil on this one. Like, it does have a high level of interest probably from this table and also from the community. And by not, and we have the opportunity to attend the committee, we can't always do that, but you don't get the same level of information, and then you perhaps get questions that you're facing now after the event. So I think Stuart's right. If this could be an item on the council agenda, I think it's the appropriate place for it. Then everyone's got the same information at the same time.
I take the point that's made, and I guess if you follow that to its logical extension, you wouldn't have any committees. You'd have a committee of the whole for all the discussions that we have, and sometimes in the past we've had that. This time round we chose to have a limited number of committees and give them a little bit more authority and scope, and I guess we're just working through that, the ramifications of that now. What we're talking about here is generally how most councils in the country, across the country function. They'll have committees, and some of them might have 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 committees that are made up of different councillors rather than all councillors, and you get this very discussion at the council meeting because people who haven't been party to the discussion aren't aware of all the details. So look, I take the point you're making, Councillor Hosted, and I guess that can happen. I wonder where the cutoff might be if we're going to say something significant or not significant. What would come to council? What would be the significance level? Is it just a dollar value? I would suggest not. I think there's a lot of other things that could be deemed significant that would need to probably need to be discussed as well. So look, I personally feel comfortable that it gets its level of scrutiny. It goes through 2 meetings before any of the recommendations become motions and a direction for council. So I'm at the will of the council, but unless we can get some sort of direction from council, then I think we should carry on.
Would you like me to move a motion, Your Worship, just test that, or how would you like?
Well, if that's what's required.
Well, I do feel, if I can, so, yeah, I think you're right, but I think this is a single item that we've singled out, and just based on the feedback, I believe it is one that the full council would like to consider. I may be alone, but
So let me just explore what that means in this particular situation. Given that we are up against a very tight time frame, an incredibly tight time frame. This, if council decides that they want to be, everybody around the table here to have that input, do we have a special council meeting to consider this?
if necessary, I guess so.
Okay, and that's appropriate. But I do think that if that is the course of council, then we need to think very carefully about why we've got committees and what is the purpose. Councillor Grant.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Isaac and Councillor. The last 6 years I've been on the council, up until this present term, we had everybody on the committee, as far as I'm pretty sure we had. And we had a different committee members and everybody, and then this has been trial from memory, yourself, Your Worship, trial, see, let's go down this road, we'll see how it goes. There are good cases for smaller committees because they're nimble and they're quick and they do things, but also there's a lot of councillors sitting around this table missing our information. And we don't always miss out on it. We get it when it gets into the math, but we're missing out on some of the discussions. We can't all be at all the committee members' meetings, but I do agree with the two previous speakers. I'm voting for that, for sitting down, everybody sitting down having a discussion on this one, but even thinking about going back to the way it used to be. We do miss out on a lot of information.
So can I just test you on that one, Councillor Grant? What do you mean by missing information?
Well, not the information, the discussions.
Yeah, you're certainly missing a discussion if you're not part of the meeting, but I think that's different to information. So there is, and you know,
I'll retract that.
yeah, like I do think it's important that we use the right words here because that suggests that council's holding information, and that's not the case.
No,
If it is, I want to know.
It's certainly not the case, that wasn't my intention.
Okay, is there any other stuff, Councillor Davis?
Through Your Worship, I think this particular item would have benefited from all of council being involved because it is a substantial item and it's a change of direction for council with the item. So I believe with this particular item it would have been beneficial for all of council to have sat in on a meeting and possibly even workshop to progress it. That's just my view on this one. I've been on council now, this is my 19th year. When I first came onto council, we had committees with different members on it, like we have for this term. It was pretty fractious, and we had meetings where you had councillors who would not able to be it. And bear in mind, those councillors were actually invited to be part of those committees, so you would have certain councillors on committees that would have been invited to come along. So all they got were in the minutes and relitigated everything. So I think we've just got to bear in mind that with big issues that isn't a possibility for this time. But that would be all I would have to say.
But I think the point's been well made, and it's something that we do need to consider. And one of the options that easily fix this situation would be all councillors on the committees. There's no problem with that at all. It will mean that there's more meetings for councillors and there's more time involved, and the expectation is that you get committee meetings. But I've got no problem with that at all. So if there's I think there's almost two discussions here, though. There's about what happens next in terms of committee structures, but there's also the question about this particular item. And in this particular item, there's one that has got quite a tight time frame around it, and I'd like you to make some comment. Steve?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Look, we've, in being awarded this funding, it was subject of a phone call from senior government officials who asked me, and was it genuinely shovel ready? And the application said, well, there was always an element around community spaces that needed a conversation with the community. But when push came to shove, I was asked when would construction likely commence, and I said, well, potentially it could happen February next year. But that's on the basis of, as you see, the timetable in the report that went to the Community Strategy Committee, an engagement process that runs through the rest of August, with the view to getting settlement on your concept, floor plan, and pricing in October, in order to get working drawings developed, tenders called, and with hopefully initial work being done in February around any asbestos that may need to be removed from the building, and the building proper work not starting to probably about May, but it's very tight, Your Worship.
Okay. The item is still open for discussion. Councillor Dixon.
Through Your Worship, I understood that any councillor could come along to any committee meeting. So is this any different? I noticed that Mr. Councillor McNeil came along to the community strategy meeting and had speaking rights. Is that a way to deal with this? Is that just open it to any councillor?
I think you're right, Councillor. Yes, any councillor can come, and as far as I'm concerned, any councillor can have input into that meeting. But just given what direction the meeting is taking now, I think probably we need to formalise this in some way or other. And I'm just going to seek some advice from the Chief Executive here now in terms of process. So it sounds to me like there's a desire for all councillors to be committee members on all committees. Is that right?
I think, Your Worship, we just, today, we should just focus on this particular issue. And all points taken, councils, I think there's a meet around the table that this item in particular could be dealt with in full council.
Two issues.
Oh, the other one's probably for future discussion.
Well, I think it's been highlighted here by the obvious feeling that some councillors feel as though they're not included in the discussion. So I think it's probably a good time to address that one as well. But in terms of, I take your point, the important thing here is where to forward with this particular item. And again, I'm going to ask for advice here, but if council want to consider this one separately as a council, and what do we do with the meetings already had? I'm not sure. And how soon do we need to do that? Probably just happen this week, possibly tomorrow.
Your Worship, when it comes to a specific item, the councillor can always call it up and say that delegation is removed and we want that issue coming before the full council. I don't see any process deficiency if the council is of a mind to do that. The wider issue about the purpose of committees, their performance and function is a matter for another day, and an agenda item, I think, where time for reflection about how this new structure is working and what are the potential or perceived shortcomings and what are the upsides. That's something that needs to be taken some time to before you move. And frankly, it's not on the agenda for discussion tonight. But the issue of the library, and bear in mind now that once you've passed this recommendation from the committee, there's no further work required of the governance arm of council until the engagement process has been concluded. And that's really about 4 weeks away from where we sit.
So I guess what I'm asking is, how do we get to if there's a mind to consider it before it goes to engagement? Again, yeah, it goes to engagement.
Just can I clarify, Your Worship, there's no suggestion we're going to undo the work to date of that committee. It's just the go forward position from here to ensure that.
Is that not? I perceived was being said.
You did.
So
Okay.
if that's the case, then that's fine. But it certainly wasn't the way I picked it up. Councillor McDonnell.
That's all what I was meaning, that from going forward, this would be discussed at council going forward, because it's such a sensitive issue.
So what do we need as council to have that discussion?
Well, next steps. So when the design is ready for discussion, as you normally would. Yeah.
So it's all pretty tight, so it's not.
There's your worship.
That has actually been outlined in the information that I've tabled for today, where the next step was going to, which includes the consultation process, which I believe has started today, tomorrow. It's a short dated consultation process, and that also includes the formation of the plans and the community consultation. I think that it's actually there. I think we're creating some noise around that we actually let that step be taken and move forward from there and bring it to obviously to the full council. Can we move it from the community strategy committee into full council for the next step? That's probably the question I'm answering.
Through your worship, the Community Strategy Committee is not scheduled to meet again until November anyway. So probably going to be an extraordinary meeting of the Community Strategy Committee or straight to full council to keep the project momentum going.
So it's actually brought to that meeting and take it away from the community strategy group, so all councillors can get all consultation plus the ability to see all that information.
That's what I was trying to ask. Sorry.
So what needs to change about the recommendation?
The last piece, that have been noted that a further report will be forwarded as a result of the community engagement together with updated costing design to full council.
Yes. And to full. So that's the only change. Right.
Just, do we need to have a workshop for, like, do we need to workshop the ideas that come back from the community and plans as a workshop in a workshop environment before we move it to the next step? Because I imagine there'll be a little bit to take in and a lot to discuss.
Yeah, through your worship, that wasn't specified in the recommendation, but that would be, I mean, depending on the type of feedback we get from the engagement process, I always envisioned there would be some type of workshop, because there may well be different options as to how to meet the messaging you receive from the public.
That workshop would need to take place when?
Depending on pricing information that you may want to have available at the time of workshop. I'm picking, your worship, it's probably going to be somewhere around about mid to latter half of September.
Okay. Okay. So we note that the final recommendation from the Community Strategy Committee be altered to recognise that the result of engagement will come to full council, firstly in a workshop scene, then to a full council meeting to consider the way forward. So is there any other alterations required to that set of motions? Does not. And what about for the rest of that committee? There's two other items, Mike. Is there any alterations there? Does not. Put that motion. The mover and the seconder are comfortable with that? Yeah, I'll put that altered motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, the motion is carried. And can we note that the next council meeting will need to have a discussion around committees? What sort of requests we make of committees at what level? Okay. Is there any late business? Youth Council are not able to make it tonight, unfortunately. Matera Community Board report. So it needs to be received and adopted. Move Councillor Phillips. I'll second for that. Councillor Bolger. Is there any discussion coming from that? Councillor Grant.
Thank you, Your Worship. This happens to me a little bit about the Terra Community Garden. I know there's a lot of work going. Yeah, we try to get volunteers for that. This department manager have done a wonderful job, as well as all the other volunteers. It's just nice. Everyone's got the ideas to try and get people motivated. I don't know what it is, whether you take it to school, the school's got their own garden, I know that, but it's a fabulous thing Ontario people are doing for the area. And you're talking about opening up more, and we will get more volunteers to go down to it. Never we got one out.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to comment about that is that the board and myself are working pretty hard to try and retain the gardens in Matera. It's a bit of an icon. We want to try and retain it. They're struggling with volunteers at the moment, but that's like most organisations in New Zealand. We're all struggling for volunteers. We're working with the group, the small group that's there at the moment, to see if we could help them out financially, to see if we also agreed to open it up to the wider community, that is the whole district, rather than just the Matera district, which may help them out in this growing season. And we're just taking a look at one or two other options that we're working with the group. And I'd just like to say that I'm with Councillor background about it would be a shame for it to fold over, and the board and myself are doing our best to try and not let it happen.
Okay. So we have a mover and a seconder for the community board being ratified. Yeah. No, we had one. Sorry, Councillor Liston, did you want to say something?
I just was going to make a comment. I'm wondering, there's a lot of money floating around at the moment for employment for people, and then that new money for employing 50 new people that the council has. Is there some way that could be tied in with the garden to do some work there to prepare the vegetables in the garden for the spring, or the Gore Garden Club? And I was just wondering what happened to the PD as well.
It's they have their specific jobs, and we can't guarantee that they're going to turn up every Saturday. And they're governed by what local, I suppose he's the warden, I suppose, has got the jobs lined up for it. So, but we had discussions about that money, about the money for the president, or just during the growing season. And if you, in the minutes, you had discussion with Mrs. Rinstead about that. And yeah, it's one of the options that we're working through.
Sorry, Your Worship, one more item there. Just Just item 4 on the Community Board. Yeah, there, next removal, just what's happened with Beirut. There's no way, Mr. Barry, that this thing can explode, is it?
No. What happened in Beirut? Sodium nitrate is a completely different compound to the OV agreements.
So it's non-compatible.
Apparently not. Not a chemist.
So it's tested, right?
Mr. Chairman, I once again, it displeases me about some of the members of our community who continually scaremonger about the situation in Matera. And I get disheartened every time I see an article once again in the paper. I think they've got to sit back and say that the government and this council are doing their utmost to remove it from Matera and give them the opportunity to do so and stop scaremongering the poor people. A classic example, and I talked about that in the minutes when they had a fire call on Matera. And when people are going past taking videos and then putting it on social media, it just blew it out all out of proportion about what the actual call was. And that's why I had answered that in print. So I just, once again, like to say to the residents of Matera, stay calm, stay safe, and let the government and the council do their job.
Certainly the deal that the Chief Executive negotiated is the best deal that was ever going to be offered. And to put obstacles in the way of that taking place is not good.
No, it's not as though we're not doing anything, Mr. Chairman. That's what annoys me the most.
It annoys me too. Okay, put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Motion is carried. On to item 7, which is tankard waste discharge facility. And we have a report from Three Waters Network Engineer. Who's going to lead that? Is that you, Matt?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you. So this is something that we've been working on for a little while. It's a specific disposal facility for tankard waste, so septic tanks and things like that are being emptied around the district and need to be discharged. So at the moment it's done by a manhole in the network. And it's, I guess, far from an ideal situation. So I've looked at a few different options and what other councils have implemented and things like that. And there's quite a variety. The solution that we've identified as preferred is trying to optimise our existing infrastructure down at the wastewater treatment plant, using our existing net screen that we upgraded not too long ago. And by having it down at the wastewater treatment plant, it gives us a lot more ability to monitor what's going on, what's going into our wastewater treatment plant and things like that. I guess we're proposing to do it in 2 phases, and that'll allow us to get it up and running initially, and then look at how it's working and how we might be able to improve it. I guess there is a reasonable cost associated with implementing the solution, so a total of about $103,000. To recover that cost, we're proposing to increase the tank waste disposal costs. So it will all be funded by the user of the facility. We've done a review of other councils' charging arrangements, and from what we've found, our current charging arrangement is significantly lower than other councils are charging. So we're proposing to increase that to make sure that we recover the costs associated with the upgrade. Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Is there any questions of councillors? Councillor Davis, did you wish?
It's through your worship. Have you had discussions with the tanker drivers or the companies to discuss the future costs? And what we might charge them?
We've certainly had discussions around the proposal to upgrade the infrastructure. I'm not sure if we've discussed the proposals.
There's been discussion in relation to pressing service and increasing costs. Specific costs hasn't been discussed.
Through your worship, I suggest that the costs do be discussed with them before we decide to go ahead, because it might be prohibitive to business at this point of the COVID and just the general business environment.
Yeah, okay.
So, sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Just asking if they can clear the cost with the firms before we go in, because we don't know, the firms themselves might not be able to pay what we need them to pay.
I guess the cost is based on what the actual cost of the facility is and what's happening in the market in terms of water, is that right?
That's correct, yes, your worship, yeah. So I guess that was the reason behind looking at the other councils and what they're charging. So we can see what, I guess, neighbouring councils are charging. I'm sure they'd be happy to continue paying what they are, but we're looking at a really, I guess, an increased level of service that will ensure we can manage what's coming into our treatment plant and have control and things like that. So it's really to benefit our wastewater treatment plant and make sure that costs are being recovered because we're discharged into our treatment plant. So it's more about just trying to fairly recover costs rather than I guess. So, I'm sure that they prefer the cheaper cost to continue, but it's whether we want that ongoing risk associated with things like that.
And I assume that the tanker drivers and suppliers would pass that cost on to them. They got it. Councillor Bolger, then Councillor Reid, then Councillor Phillips.
I think it's a good idea to upgrade the facility to make it more secure, both for the tanker drivers and for access. And probably got a wee bit of a fright with the initial cost of $500 to register your tanker driver one-off and then a $500 fee every year. Yes, though there's not a lot of tanker drivers who generate income from it. An increase of $50 5 cubic metres, and I don't know if that includes GST, to a charge of $25 including GST cubic metre, so it's quite a jump. I'm sure we need to recover our costs, otherwise the ratepayer has to do it. But somewhere along the line, that cost will be passed on to the people who benefit from that business. They're mostly local people, so I would like to see that cost spread out over a longer period, and a little bit of a look to see if that cost can't be moderated a wee bit. It's a reasonable increase.
Just a question, Matt. We've referred so far to tanker drivers and the registration of tanker drivers. It's not tanker drivers, is it? It's tanker operators.
Yeah, operator, yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, sorry, bad choice of words on my behalf. Tanker truck operator. So so it'll be the business that operates the tanker. So there could be multiple drivers.
Yeah, it's just that the cost is eventually going to be passed on. Probably people are going to be ratepayers in that district. So we've got to recover the cost. I just want to make sure that it's moderate, and then if we're able to spread it out over another couple of years or whatever, we can keep it moderate. But it may well be, you may well come back to me and say, well, no, we're already doing that. So just a comment.
Councillor Reid, then Councillor Phillips, and Councillor Hosted.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Bolger actually asked my question. So the only concern that I really I mean, it's all user pays these days and we're all at the other end of that. But the one-off registration fee, what is the purpose of that?
Your worship, so that's the process. So they're going to have swipe card access into the facility, and so it's the process of getting them registered and adapting them into site and getting familiar with the facility and all that sort of administration costs.
So that would cover sort of health and safety issues as well?
Yes, that's correct.
Hey, thank you. Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. You probably just answered my question, but the other question I have is in regards to, is this registration going to be open to all Target Southland operators? Or just local?
Through Your Worship, yes, so that's, and I guess that's part of the reason that we're proposing the cost that we are, is to make sure that it is full cost recovery, so that waste is coming from outside the district. We can be confident that we're recovering those costs and that the district ratepayer isn't funding something from outside the district.
Yeah, I think Your Worship. No, it's a good initiative. It's been a long time coming, really. That manhole's been operating for several years, and we're just probably lucky to not have been any major accidents or injuries.
Councillor Heisey.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. It's through you, Worship. Just to context this, what is a typical septic tank holding? Just around the costing, $25 a cube. What is that going to cost now versus what's currently being charged? Because that's what's going to hit the consumer.
Yes, probably couldn't answer that with too much confidence. I guess I'd say, the septic tank might hold 4 to 5 cubes of sludge and maybe so might be looking at $125 compared to 50 now.
Every 3 years. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, so just research and then come back into the
I wonder if we're chasing, sorry, I accept the sentiments around the table, but I just wonder if we're not chasing a significant cost increase when you look at the frequency to which a septic tank holder is going to incur this cost, as opposed to what a normal ratepayer or connected ratepayer is paying in terms of charges for sewage services. So you might have
I think option 3 is good. Normally when a septic tank is being emptied, there is no water left in the tank. It is full on solids. So moving that to the oxidation ponds is, definitely. So at least it's not going to block up or do any damage to our Wigan Street mains or wherever they go along there. It is, like I said, it is normally just solids. So the fact that they're emptying it at the oxidation ponds and we can solidify it and liquefy it, and so it's better and easier processed. That's just going through 20 years of experience of playing with septic tanks. And honestly, look, when you go unblock a drain or clear a septic tank, people are happy. They're just happy that's gone. You've got to put down to your hygiene as well, your health and safety. So there's a lot of litigated factors in there when it comes to dealing with raw sewage. So got no problems with the pricing.
Okay. Councillor Reid, then Councillor McDonnell.
I'm sorry, this is not serious, but I was quite amused to see that the acronym was TOOS truck as opposed to anything else. Was that deliberate?
No.
Okay.
Did you see that?
Councillor McDonnell.
With being a country, I've just had a problem. Nicholas my septic tank blocking up, and it costs about $400, I think, currently to empty a septic tank. So we've just increased it to 500, but it's probably going to wait 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. A normal tank.
I'm quite happy with the recommendation.
Yeah, some tanks.
And I'll never use it.
Yeah, I was thinking about the frequency. It's probably 5 years since that's been emptied.
Yeah. So every 5, 6, 7 years. Not so bad.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Thanks, Your Worship. That's the, what's the one thing you put there, 50 years? Is that what you're looking at?
Through Your Worship, yes, so I guess it starts to feed into the discussion that we're having around the wastewater treatment plant and what the future of that's going to look like. But the infrastructure that was installing here is about getting trucks access into our industry and things like that. So that would certainly last for a few years. The wastewater treatment and
So all the costing you've done, and exclusion is funding this cost.
so that's again part of that higher fee is to make sure that we've got some money there to recover that.
This is not a break even. This is a little bit bigger than break even.
Yeah.
It's payback.
It's
Pay the loans.
Self-contained.
It's aimed to be fully funded, so cost recovery.
Okay. Any further comment or discussion? If not, would somebody like to move the recommendations? Councillor Phillips, seconded Councillor Reid. Is there any discussion on those recommendations? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, the motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. So it takes us on to long-term plan and draft timetable. And council will note there's a fair bit over the long. Do you want to talk to this one, Mr. Chief Executive?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. My new Chief Financial Officer has prepared a schedule based around trying to get us into position to be able to adopt a consultation document by the end of March next year. And you might think, oh, that's quite a wee way away, but on the basis of fortnightly workshops that you signed up for last meeting, and history tells us that we probably need at least a dozen workshops a week's gallop away on you. And given the appetite of some to have a deep dive into the revenue and financing policy, I'm very confident that you'll need at least 2 workshops and maybe a third in there as well, depending on how exploratory you want to be in terms of changes to existing policy. So we recognise in preparing the schedule, Your Worship, that the first meeting only occurs next Tuesday. And if the 25th of August is set in concrete because Luke Blackburn is going to be doing the tutorial, and that's the only day he's really available. But if you were to shy away from committing to next Tuesday, we just have to roll it all back a week or two, and we might have to catch up later on down the line in terms of the timetabling. And there's certainly a fact in the system in terms of intensifying the frequency of workshops if we're on a roll. But I do know from previous LTPs that elected member and senior staff fatigue can set in if there's just a rolling, knock them down, drag them out series of workshops, quite intense.
I noticed the halls grants are on at the same time. Did we move that forward quarter of an hour?
Oh, yeah, we do that. Yeah.
So just, councillors are comfortable with the schedule? Can we get those all put into calendars? So these will be put into your calendars? Yep.
Move the halls one back to 3:30.
Big button.
Can we move the halls one to 3:30? It's scheduled on the calendar.
Yeah, but these ones, we get all these put into our calendars. So Carla will do that for you. Fingers crossed. It goes well. So would somebody like to move that be received and noted, please? Councillor Bolger, seconded Councillor Grant. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. Move on then to item 9, which is the grants subcommittee. We have a report here that needs to be received and recommendations contained within the report be ratified. Is there any discussion on the report? Too far down the track?
I'll move that.
You move both?
I'll move that recommendation.
Okay, so the 2 recommendations that are there. Yep. Do I have a seconder for that?
Should be council on the grant.
So it's moved, Councillor Grant. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Reid, thank you. Is there any discussion?
Would be quite good to have a discussion with the hospital people on how that funding works. A lot of councillors probably are not up to date on where the connection between council and hospital is, and also the political problems that they're having with funding from the DHB, and whether there can be more pressure put on the political side from council to make that a bit more fairer between Otago and South.
You don't, as far as I'm aware, we haven't met as a council and health thinking or limited to date, have we? Not that I'm aware of. I think it would be a good idea though. So I think we should bear that in mind and see if we can organise a meeting, because there's a lot of good stuff going on around there. Not lots of money. Did you want to say something? Doug?
Yes, Your Worship, referring to what Councillor Yarra was saying, Mr. Dexter, the CEO of Port came along, he was extremely good at telling us exactly how it was, and that's exactly what John is saying, and you probably will need to hear it, and as you were saying, we haven't had an update for a while. It's quite one-sided from the funding from DHB towards Fair Health, and not a lot of people know that. They've been batting at it for quite a number of years. They go 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But anyway, I think it would be really good to get going on.
I think it would certainly be useful to give the CE come to the council, but I think probably the CE and the board members would be good to have in a room so we know who they are and can fix their steely gaze on them, I guess. So it's been moved and seconded, the recommendations contained on page 33. We can just add to that a meeting between Gore House Limited and Inc. Is that what we're talking about? Be organised between the council and both those entities. Want to say something, Councillor?
Yeah. I just wonder on John's point whether it would be appropriate that there's something circulated to councillors before that so they understand what council's input is, because it's not entirely clear the connection.
Just how, what do the transactions between us and the Port Health Limited and how it all works? Just because it's quite, get around this, not that simple.
Most councils
around this table would have no idea.
Like, I was formerly a director of Gore Health Limited and I couldn't explain it to you. It didn't sort of feature on our agents. Dennis might be. There's no issue, it'd just be good for council.
No, it just needs to be informative.
Okay, so we'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, the motion is carried. On to item 10. Quite a big item. Three Waters Service Delivery Reform, which has got huge implications for not just this council, but all local government into the future and beyond. And we have a comprehensive report here from the Chief Executive. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. This report's been mainly modelled on something that's standardised and sent around New Zealand for all councils to use. So a lot of the language is, but not all, has been adopted with that in mind. However, I can report that to date, I'm aware of probably about 10 to 12 councils that already have signed up to the MOU. And the important point to emphasise here is that being a signatory does not actually trigger any downstream obligation apart to act in good faith and to adopt an open mind about what aggregation in terms of governance and management of water and three waters may mean. There's an enormous amount of work to tease out, and I guess that for a lot of us in the sector, there is probably a feeling of slight unease about how much is being advanced in terms of agenda and how much is actually known by the general public. And I suspect there's maybe a gap in knowledge there that will need to be bridged as the rubber hits the road in the reform program as we went down this highway. The real crunch moment for council is going to be probably about 12 months' time, where there will be some more binding obligations about entering into a process. The government has said that they will be, at this stage, accompanied by a financial incentive package. And we obviously wait with interest as to what that package may look like. In terms of phase one package, my report suggests states there's $1.1 million as of right. And pretty much also there's another equal allocation of 1.1 million sitting in a regional pool to be shared by the three TLAs. That's 1.1 coming to the Gorges Council on top of the 1.1 were guaranteed, mainly because of the heavily flavoured suggestion and the commentary coming from the government that councils may like to replicate the regional formula as per the national formula. I personally think there may be some other different ways of approaching that. And it wasn't my suggestion, although I do endorse it, of having the Chief Executive delegated authority to negotiate this package. If that's genuinely been the direction nationally. Mainly, I think the government wants to see a timely consensus reached about regional funding. And I suspect they probably think if they have multiple councils in the room together trying to knock out a package, it might take some time. But this is a really, really important issue for local government and New Zealand generally. The notion that water, three waters, and stormwater is still an element of some uncertainty. At this stage, it's really just water and wastewater to be delivered by this stage. The preferred outcome is a public company servicing multiple regions with a skill-based board of directors. The key issue, I guess, for New Zealanders to work out is that the ability to charge for water and wastewater is a pretty powerful instrument. And some of this noted during the workshops to date, 20 years ago, New Zealand's power industry was radically reformed, and the promise of cheaper power bills was articulated by the then Energy Minister. I don't think too many New Zealanders have encountered lower power bills in the intervening 20 years. So power, water, they are quite similar in terms of their revenue gathering abilities, and that will be an important factor when it comes to making the big decisions. And it'll be interesting to see what New Zealanders generally make of an idea of having control and influence wrested from a local community and deposited into a bigger centre somewhere north or south of where you might be residing. So they are important issues that in recent times, certainly in council amalgamations, those matters have been voted down by the public, who I think do safeguard intensely the ability to control. A big question, I think, coming out, Your Worship, of this would be, and one of my colleagues has posed this question just in a private conversation about what is the problem we're trying to solve here? Because if it's money, councils can put their hand up and say, give us some, we'll get on and do it. Certainly some of the issues this council is facing, my personal view is that we've got the water supply and quality issues pretty much tamed, but the wastewater is another beast altogether. And a lot of that, of course, has been driven by the government in terms of its new just released national policy statement on fresh water. And that will pose some real challenges to both regional and local government moving forward. And it's not as if those challenges are going to be removed if water is delivered into a larger regional entity. And if those costs come onto the entity, they will have to be recovered some way, unless there is a generous government funding. So there's a whole pile of issues in this, Your Worship, and of course questions around the workshops were, well, what happens to the debt of an asset that has been generated? And I would have assumed that any transfer is not just the asset, but it's a liability. And the encouragement of the powers that be and the steering group is to keep up your investment in this area, because at the moment, this is still law. We are the lawful owners of this assets and we've got obligations to meet. So any questions around getting the stitch on water treatment upgrades, for example, really off the table. We need to carry on with this. And despite the government talking about a 3-year timetable for implementation, I think most commentators are thinking that's pretty to very ambitious. This will take some time and could be a big distraction as we try and do all the other things while keeping our eye on the report. But at this point in time, Worship, I don't believe there's any reasons why we shouldn't enter the memorandum of understanding, receive the funds, and then step our way cautiously forward with eyes wide open.
Councillor Bolger.
Of course, we get to sign up to the memorandum of understanding. I read it only lasts for a year. I do see that some of the expectation is that money will go into creation of employment and capital works. I hope that doesn't actually bring somebody to read meters, because ultimately you would think that central government would have an expectation 2 years down the track that will be charged. It's not possible for our ratepayers to meet the standards required by central government from rates, and it's high time and timely that central government's going to put some money into this. Unfortunately, it's going to come with some restrictions and we may lose a wee bit of control. Look, for 1.1 million for a year, I think we should risk it and go for it.
I don't think you need to worry too much, Councillor Bolger, about people out reading meters. They'll be done electronically and you're on your phone. But I take the point that Steve's made and Cliff's made, that the way we deliver, and not just us, I'm talking about local government in general across the country, the way we do it is obviously broken because we're not there. We're not delivering the quality of water that we want to deliver. Most of that comes down to cost. So I think Steve did right insofar as potentially having that money would give us the ability to do what we need to do. But again, Councillor Bolger said, government's not going to give a whole lot of money and just say go away and do it. They want to have some control. So there will be some reform of some sort. I don't know what that will look like, but we need to think carefully about what shape that might take, because it has the potential to completely change both the form of local government and the role of local government going forward. And I believe in a more fundamental way than the reforms of 1989. So who knows where this is going to end, but we do need to be aware that, as the Chief Executive has pointed out, control of water is almost giving a blank check to someone, because you can charge what you like and everybody needs water. So we need to make sure it's retained in public ownership. What that public ownership looks like, I'm not sure. Personally, I'd like to see it as local as possible, but that may not be the outcome. I don't think we have a choice. In fact, I think we'd be silly not to sign the MOU, but we do need to take a very clear and conscious effort. We'll make a clear and conscious effort to be involved as time goes on, and there will be a number of meetings along the way. Probably they won't all be held in Gore. In fact, maybe some of them won't be held in Gore, but I think I'll just encourage councillors that if you have the opportunity to be part of the discussions around water reform, take it. The meeting in Invercargill was particularly informative and very well attended. And I certainly learned a lot, and I know that the councillors that were there learned a lot. But open for discussion, Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'm one that's going to err on caution here, and I believe that we should be very cautious about stepping forward and putting a signature to this. I can see it going to be a big brother scenario, and that every ratepayer in the Gore district will end up paying through their water meter system, and it won't take 10 years because they want cost recovery. I'd be very interested to get the review, the thoughts of the general manager and also the managers on how they believe that they're going forward, what they see going forward. To me, I can see it turning into an NZTA type scenario, is that the last one on the ranks will be the only one that get the money, and we are a small council. That's just my thought on the situation. And we shouldn't be hoodwinked with the 1.1 million carrot that's dangling in front of us.
I take the point you make, Councillor Phillips, bearing in mind there's no stick with this particular. This is a grant, and council can, as long as it's providing a better water service, can do what it wants. I think as time goes on and we learn more about what the opportunities and the hooks are, then we do need to be having the discussions that you're talking about here. We do need to be wary, because you're dead right in terms of what small local government units might look like in the future. Because if by chance water delivery and water maintenance was taken out of our role, that leaves quite a gap in our functionality as a council. That'll happen across the country. Councillor Grant, then Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would say it was a little bit arbitrary, that's not the word, just a little bit weary of originally, and then reading on page 4 of the MOU, which I was quite happy to see. The water service delivery arrangements, this is at the top of the page, water service delivery arrangements must meet following fundamental requirements and safeguards mechanisms that provide for continued public ownership of water service delivery infrastructure and protect against privatisation. Because I have had people stop me recently about these water reforms and asking, it looks like it's going to be privatisation. As the parent companies being compromised. No, I wouldn't think so. This MOU spells that out quite clearly.
I think I'm right in saying that Watercare and Wellington Water are both public ownership.
Correct.
And there's some challenges there.
Yes, yeah. So now, just when I read this, that 2 lines there, I thought, no, I think for the 1.1 million that we're going to see.
I guess the point I'm making is that there's public ownership and public ownership. Well, what does it look like? And we don't know yet. Yeah. But certainly public ownership is, in my mind, sacrosanct, but sometimes that public ownership can be at a very much arm's length from the public. Yeah. Councillor Phillips, sorry, Councillor Dixon, yeah, Councillor Reid.
Worship, is the 1.1 million or the 2 million that we've got here going towards a particular project? And would that mean that we need to be hiring more staff for that project, which is part of the tender?
No, through your worship, the expectation is that it would be, we're encouraged to spend it on operational or capital works, preferably something that's that can be dragged forward out of your long-term plan. So the hint is, water or wastewater pipeline renewals lends itself very well to this. And it would just be a contract that we would let and manage and oversee in the normal way. So obviously the physical works done by contracting staff would be a boost to your local economy. And that's certainly to be encouraged, but I don't see any downsides of internal staff capacity to be able to deliver and spend this money well. And the recommendation before you is that we come up with a proposed delivery plan, and we'll identify projects or projects that
CapEx or
OpEx that can give effect to these funds.
Councillor Reid, then Councillor Phillips.
Oh, no.
Councillor Phillips.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I'd just like to read this to Councillor Grant. And 3.5 of this, it goes, while the government starting intention is for publicly owned multi-regional models for the water service delivery, with the preference for local authority ownership, final decision will be delivered. The models informed by discussion from the local government. That means that if local government don't get their way, then it will be private.
Potentially, yeah. We've got to go on the horizon.
That's why I'm saying it there, on caution.
Councillor McFarlane.
Just in regard to if we actually, through your worship, to the CEO, sign off the MOU, what effect does that have in regard to our long-term LTP that we're starting to go into the workshop around? Does it bind us to anything, or we still have free grace around what?
Through your worship, pretty much free, uninhibited ability to develop our own long-term plan. What I'm envisioning we're going to be doing is extracting something out of our current plan that's sitting in maybe years 4 or 5 or 6 and bring it forward into year 1. Now we have this money. So I don't think anything that I'm envisaging that we'll come up with would straitjacket the long-term plan at all.
Okay, any other comments, Councillor Gallagher?
You get the other 1.1 million Southland and Invercargill that both join the scheme, don't they? So, and then it gets dished out on pro rata if we can agree how it goes.
Yeah, through your wish, that's why the suggestion is the chief executives get in a room and hammer out a deal that everyone can live with. Yeah.
It's actually, into one thing, it's like shovel-ready money. If those 3 councils agree, we're probably in for about 2.2 million. No strings attached. Yeah.
Yes, through which, absolutely. This is, I'm pretty sure this is a slam dunk $2.2 million grant. Who knows, maybe a bit more depending on how negotiations go. And on top of other shovel-ready money that we have been confirmed, and still some to be decided. We're in the shortlist for. Yeah, this is all these funds are coming to us without real tags in terms of conditions around minimum contribution, apart from just get on with it and spend it in a timely way.
Okay, so any further questions or comments? I think this is a pretty significant motion, a sort of a 10-part motion, but I think it's reasonably straightforward, and hopefully councillors can see the way through that. Is there any alterations required to those motions you can see? If not, somebody like to move that those motions in total be put. Councillor Poulter, do I have a seconder to that? Councillor Reid, thank you. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, the motion is carried. Councillor Phillips, you're against. Okay. Thank you, councillors. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the open agenda of council today. So I'll move that it be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely items that are listed on page